Hello. I really miss giving classes, partly because I miss just spouting off about things. So I want to spout off about something right now, and that's composition. Composition is the absolute basis, the root of what art is. It's not how well you can paint, it's not how well you can use the brush, it's not the surface, it's not even the subject matter, it's the composition. And I'm going to show you something of what I mean. Let's start. This painting is going to be a little, I'm going to show you more on this painting a little bit further on into the presentation, because this is a painting that requires the background to work with the composition. I have a lot of students who have a real problem with backgrounds. They really want to eliminate backgrounds. They figure that they're not important. The only thing that they want to paint is the figure, is the subject. And I want to show you how important backgrounds are, how important the whole canvas is. A painting isn't a painting of something. A painting is an entity that goes out to all the edges. And everything within that has to work. If you eliminate something, you eliminate it at your peril. So, welcome to my composition workshop. I'm going to show you how it is essentially the basis of all good art. These are some of the elements we're going to talk about. When I do this presentation in my classes, when I talk about some principles of art composition, we go through all of these and I give examples, I show how they work, and I show their importance and the variations of them that can be really beneficial to your composition. But for this particular one, I want to talk about my absolute favorite, geometry, and in particular how geometric shapes direct our eyes. Now, we got to go to the source here. Let's talk about Leonardo da Vinci. Now, Leonardo da Vinci was a mathematician as well as a painter. So he loved using geometric shapes when he did his paintings. And I want to show you about geometric alignment of the background, in particular in Da Vinci's The Last Supper. Now, Da Vinci wasn't the only person to paint The Last Supper during his Renaissance period. There were many other artists who painted them. Artists like Andrea del Castano, or however you pronounce it. You'll notice that he has an entire room painted, all the architecture, all of the disciples are there. Apparently they were painted in full size. Notice all the textures and all the colors. But when we go to Da Vinci's painting, we also have architecture, but Da Vinci worked really hard to make sure that the architecture worked to direct your eye in the direction he wanted you to go. He had all of the lines of perspective going straight to the major figure of Jesus in the middle. You'll notice they're all pointing toward the right eye, the part of the brain that is talks about the emotional side of it. All of the lines of perspective. The figure of Jesus is created in an equilateral triangle, very strong image. Again, a geometric image. He's got all of the disciples set up in groupings of three. And even within each of the three, the eye lines, and most of them are also pointed directly at that particular central aspect of the painting. Almost all the eye lines point there. And the other thing about him is that he put all of the important stuff on a line dead center down the middle of the painting. Now this is geometry. This is geometry. This isn't art, but this is geometry that works in favor of art. So let's have a look at some other aspects about composition that I think are really important, in particular about background. So let's look at the effects of background on foreground. Now that painting I was showing you before, it's called Behind the Curtain, and here's the photo reference for it. Now, as I said, I have many students who really actually think it's a good idea to remove the background, that they believe the background is distracting. So let's remove the background from this photo reference. That's what the background actually looks like without the figure in the middle. But if we were going to paint that, it would be an organic shape of a woman, and you've got to put something there. So let's start with just a color. Now, when we start to look at this figure with that background on it, all paintings have geometry to them. So let's look at the geometry that creates the figure in the middle. We have the ovals. We have triangles that create all sorts of the elements that are the solid parts of the painting. Now, when you put all of those together and you look at the balance of it without background, it all hangs on the right. Everything tilts. So let's go back to the backgrounds. Once you start to look at how the background sits in there and what the background is, you start to notice that the background actually works with the figure and it moves through the figure. There are geometric lines that move through the figure and help to tie it all together. There are geometric triangular pieces as well that come up and through and use the background to echo elements within the figure itself. Now, without the background, the negative space behind the figure, all paintings with the original background or not, still have negative space. So when you remove the background, the negative space behind the figure is a shape that's like that on the left, and this long skinny piece on the right goes all the way down to the bottom. Now when you put the background in again, you'll notice that there is a dark shape right there in the middle that stops it halfway up. And if you run that line across to the belt and turn and go back up through the fabric, you get this wonderful division top to bottom. If you start to look at how that piece runs up to the middle and jumps over and goes up and across, now the negative space creates a totally different shape. It's not down left side and right side. It's mostly across the top. It runs across the top all the way over to the other side because it's all dark. It dips down into the head area. Now the important part is there is no top to the head. When you have a lost edge, you have to leave it lost. You can't add it in thinking that your job is to recreate it. That is what the negative space looks like in this painting. That's how the background works with the foreground. Let's look at backgrounds as main design elements. Here's another of my painting. This one's called Convergence. Now, if we go back to the same idea of removing the background, there's the organic shape that is the dancer. But this painting isn't about organic shapes. This painting is in fact about geometric shapes. So if we start to look at the major design element, which is the table in the background, it runs down across there and you run up across this side of the figure, along the arm and out the top in the other black shapes there, which creates a gigantic triangle on the right hand side, including the major part of the figure. Now, once we're in that triangle, let's look at elements within the figure that helps to support the triangular geometric shape within this painting. So if we look at the light and dark line of the hair, it points straight down to the point of that triangle. Even the eyes look down at the point of the triangle and straight out the bottom. Let's look at other parts of here. Are there other triangles? Yes, there's one down that side and it pops over to there and it creates another triangle on that side there, which includes a second one if you divide it across that line. We bring it down along the side of the dress and we create another triangle on that side. Now let's go back to the main triangle there. Once we have the main triangle in place, you got to look at the negative shapes around the main triangle. There's a triangle, a negative shape there, a negative shape there, and another one on that side as well. And when you look at them, they are also triangles. Now, it's not just the background that creates and the triangles in conjunction with the foreground. Let's look at the figure itself. Inside the figure, there are major triangles. Designs that work with that organic shape, but add a strong geometric approach. And when you put all that together, this painting is essentially about triangles. It's not about an organic shape of a dancer. Okay, let's look at geometry in still life. Now, one of the better still life painters in this world is Mary Pratt. Here's mangoes on a brass plate. Excellent painter, beautiful job. when you look at this as a still life, there's a tendency to think that it's just randomly placed and beautifully painted. But let's look at the actual geometry of the composition. We have, of course, the brass plate, giant oval. It has other ovals within it. And as we come in with the ovals, we start to see that the mangoes are themselves a collection of ovals. Now, when we go to that pit in the middle, it's not just randomly placed there. It's in fact almost exactly on the center line of the painting. We go to other ovals throughout, that mango behind, even partial ovals created by the designs. Let's put that center line back in and run a line corner to corner. Where it meets the upper right corner is essentially a place where almost all of the other relative lines through the painting also converge. So this painting isn't a random placement of a brass plate with two mangoes. This painting is a beautifully composed painting. Let's look at geometry and landscape now. Now, the Impressionists were great technicians in the way that they composed a painting. They were beautifully loose and free with some of the way that they painted it. But the compositions are amazing. So let's first of all look at the painting by Claude Monet that gave them their name. This is Impression Sunrise. Now, I have no actual knowledge of this, but my guess is it probably took him 20 minutes to paint it, since he paints from life, and sunrises don't hang around that long. So everything that I'm going to talk about here is not something that was necessarily thought out by Claude Monet, but came from his artistic gut. So let's look at some of the geometric shapes within this painting. They're subtle, like a line through there, but the weird part is that every time I put these lines in here, you see it and you go, oh, no, that can't be. And then when I move it, you go, oh, there it was. Let's move it down there. You can almost see the angle or place where it used to be. As I just move this around, we can see all sorts of other ovals within the way that the composition was made. And of course, the major oval, which is the sun. It's not just ovals, though. He's got rectangles in here. Good solid blocks of color that create absolute solidity to the painting. Okay, Van Gogh. Van Gogh was pretty well a painting genius, not recognized necessarily in his time. And he also used a lot of geometry within his paintings. So let's have a look at the geometry in this one. There's some fairly obvious geometry. We got ovals. And some not so obvious geometry. Now these are the most obvious geometry within them, the squares. Look at how square some of these elements are. And triangles, huge, solid blocks of triangle throughout this painting. Okay, one of the Impressionist painters that spent a long time making sure that his composition was exactly what he wanted was Paul Cézanne. Now this looks like just a random landscape, but Paul Cézanne didn't do anything random, and I'm going to show you what I mean. In this painting, the geometric alignments of things are just amazing when you start to look at them. This painting is also a great example of poo-pooing a number of, quote, rules in art, like never cut a painting in half with a subject, never arrow a corner. You take every one of those rules, and I can probably show you a master painter who has broken that rule beautifully, and Cézanne is one of them. Here, for instance, we've got a rectangle and the same size rectangle above. So in other words, that bridge enters the painting almost dead center. And then we have the left side is essentially the same size as the two rectangles on the right. So the tree up the middle is dead center. You've got lines that run up the tree to the bridge, lines that run up the other tree on the other side, and one that comes across, creating the top edge of a trapezoidal shape. We've got his favorite mountain and the top of the tree. They line up perfectly. He's got the mountain coming down on the right-hand side to where the viaduct meets the tree and continues on to where the river meets the tree on the other side. And we've got a perfectly horizontal line through there coming all the way down and down along the river and out the corner. Then the viaduct itself aims straight over at the dark of the tree on that side and comes back up toward the mountains. Now we're going to look at another Monet. Now this is I believe this is Giverny, the Normandy coast. And this is, I think, Monet's, where Monet came from, is his kind of home territory. So he's familiar with this. Now the beauty of this geometric approach to painting is that it states what is happening in that landscape. And let me show you what I mean. These are sandstone cliffs, and these sandstone cliffs are crumbling. They are being weathered away. So as you start to look at them geometrically, we have a rectangle of this cliff with the top starting to be eaten away. We have a rectangle over here where most of it's been eaten away. It's not actually a triangle. It's a rectangle because it runs up straight up the one side. You look at the gap in between. It's like a gigantic crack has formed in that blue of the sky. The whole thing is breaking apart. It's in reverse. Then we've got, of course, the rectangle of the water and the lower part of the painting, and the cliff on the right. Then we've got some ovals. We have the negative space formed within that part there, and the beach, and the large boulder. Okay, let's look at some geometry and abstract painting. Now, one of the real shakers and movers of the abstract movement was Marcel Duchamp, and here's his Nude Descending a Staircase. Now he wanted this painting to depict movement because film was a new medium at the time, and it started to show moving pictures, and he wanted his paintings to move as well. So we have Nude Descending a Staircase. Let's look at the construction of this one. There's a dark triangle in the lower left corner that's almost exactly the same as the dark triangle in the upper right corner. So we have perfect balance. We move the triangle over to that side where it starts to get a little dark coming in there. We have other triangles that move all the way up, adding movement to the side. We have what you could probably consider the ovals of the hips as they move down. The major hip at the bottom area, the major circular design, has elements within the painting that point to it to keep your eye going in that direction, keep your eye focused on that part of the painting. And once you move that over to the dead center, which there is a place for it, you have other elements pointing down toward it in that location as well, keeping your eye moving toward these important areas. Okay, one of my favorites, geometry and figurative work. Now, of course, we're going to talk about figurative work. We're going to have to talk about Degas. This is Edgar Degas. He's 1834 to 1917. He was an excellent painter. There, I've said it, and I'm proud of it. This one's called Woman in the Bath, 1886. Now, it's not just a woman in the bath. So there's the obvious geometric form of the bathtub. Large oval, centrally located, really focuses you on that particular part of the painting. But it also draws you down in with the oval below it. And because of the angle of the perspective, the bottom line of the bottom oval is exactly the same as the bottom line of the top oval, so it draws you down into it. Then we start to look at other ovals within. We've got the head and we've got the hips. Now, he's put subliminal ovals throughout as well. He may not have done it intentionally. I'm pretty sure he didn't, but these guys are pretty good at just making that happen. So we got a line down across there. We've got another line down here on the curtain. And if you run those two together, along with the bottom edge, you get a perfect oval in that area. We've got a line in the carpet. And we've got folds in the material, and we got the other side of the tub. Basically another oval. We've got a line up the sheets on this side, creating another oval. Now, it's not just ovals in this painting that are kind of quite geometrically specific. Let me show you. We have the straight edge of the curtain on that side and the straight edge of the curtain on that side. And when you put the two of them together, they create a triangle, the top edge of a triangle that points and converges on the major design element of the painting, which is the edge of the tub. If we move that triangle over, we have another triangle, which is the figure, again, converging on the point of the tub. And then the figure itself has another triangle within it, pointing at the edge of the tub. Okay, one of the things that I was asked at one of my presentations on this is, how do I use this? How can I use this information? Because I want it all to be subliminal. Well, one of the best ways to use this information is to take a lot of shots of the same pose. So let's look at different shots of the same image. Here's shot A. This is from my class. We've got a dancer sitting on the floor. Here's shot B. Same dancer, slightly different, sitting on the floor. Shot C, same dancer, slightly different, sitting on the floor. And shot D, same dancer, a little bit closer in, but still sitting on the floor. They're all the same subject, but each of these photo references has a different feel to it. And part of that feel comes from the background. Let's show you. Let's look at A. We obviously have negative spaces in the background that create elements that go down through the figure, align with parts of the figure. Now, this little piece in the corner is really important because it doesn't exist in the others. So I'll show you what I mean. If you start to look at this, you can see how the negative spaces between the major tables makes this beautiful dark, double dark pattern on either side. And then you've got a shadow line across the bottom edge there that goes in behind the figure. Now we've got the oval of the face, we've got the oval of the fan, we've got the outside edge ovals of not only the shadow on the floor, but the edge of the skirt. And the edge of the skirt, in fact, or the shadow, I should say, on the floor creates a negative space on the floor itself. So if we start to look at some of these that come down, they're getting close. They're not perfect alignments, but they work as an alignment, as a relative alignment to what it is we want to see. Now, one of the things about these ovals and these lines in place is that when you start to look at this figure and you start to open yourself up to it, you can feel that the focal point is where the star is. I absolutely hate rules in art, but there is a rule of thumb, let's put it that way, about where you can put your focal point. And in this particular instance, that works well because the line of the hair points to it, the line of the eyes point to it, the line up through the skirt points to it, up along the fan points to it, and this is the rule of thumb. It's called the rule of thirds. If you divide your image into thirds up and thirds across, some of the best places to have your focal point are on the intersections of those. Keep that in mind because we're going to look at one other of the photo reference. This is photo B. You'll notice that there isn't a third table showing, so we now only have just two tables, which changes the compositions quite a bit. And once we start to throw in some of the extra goodies, there's still a sense that that is where the focal point is. Now, because again, that is still on the intersection of the thirds. If we look at the two paintings together, same focal point, in other words, on the same intersection of the thirds, the painting on the left, this one, the painting on the left, to me, and again, it could be completely in an individual choice, but to me, the painting on the left seems to be an image of her, the dancer, interacting with her surroundings. In other words, the focal point is on the intersection between her and her background. The image on the right, the focal point seems to be on her heart, and the painting would be, in my estimation, far more directed toward her as a person and not as her intersecting with her background. Two different versions of exactly the same photograph. Now, they're not cropped versions of the same photograph. They are two separate photos taken at the same time during the same photo session. That's why I really want you to start taking lots and lots and lots of photos, because each one will talk to you differently. All right. That's some of the major elements. Now I want to see what happens when we put it all together. Let's look at some alignments. Let's look at some fascinating alignments. In particular, again, Degas. Now Degas didn't just do nudes or dancers. He actually did horses as well. This is horse racing in Longchamp. Now it's a landscape with horses, but it's far more than a landscape with horses. Let's look at how it's constructed. First of all, we have a line along the upper hill area, another line along the fence, and then if you start to look at lines along the hooves on the left, and lines down the face of the horse to the hooves, to his hooves, you'll notice that they arrow toward a very interesting focal point of the ear. If we do the same thing up the hooves over here and the hooves on the horse on the right, it also points to a focal point, again, very near the horizon line of the fence. Do the same thing on the horse on the right, and it points to another focal point, another point of interest. Let me call it that. Let's go to the horses on the far left. Come up through there, and they intersect on the absolute edge of the painting. That's actually a fascinating place because it gives you a sense that there's more outside of this painting. It's not all totally enclosed. Because once you take that in place and you run a line up, your eye goes that way. And then when you run along this direction, your eye goes out there. And the two of them balance directional thrusts outward. Like that. Now, if we go back in, let's look at along the hooves of all these horses and along those hooves, and they point again to another grouping, a grouping of three horses in the back and the fascinating kind of forest of legs that are there. Okay, let's look at some other geometric shapes within this. Let's look at rounds, some circles. There's the horse's butt and the rider's head. Horse's butt, rider's head. Horse's butt, rider's head. Horse's butt, rider's head. Now the weird part about this is all of the riders' heads are in a perfect line. And if you look at how the oval around those horses work, it goes right all the way up to the top, and it's like a gigantic pie being intersected. Let's look at the shirts. We're talking rectangles all the way across. Okay, and those also are in line straight along the fence line. Everything lines up, points you straight there, keeps you there, keeps you in the interesting part, and gives you interesting things to look at. All the way down and along. Okay, so when you are doing the concept of alignments within your paintings or your photo reference, I want it to be all subconscious. Because I don't want you to do a lot of thinking about it. I want you to feel what's going on. Composition that comes from feeling can be quite amazing. And let me show you what I mean. Here's a photo from one of my classes. Now, you can see she's cut off at the waist, but it's still a good photograph because there's beautiful alignments going on in here. We've got the line that comes down the fan to the hand, jumps under the hand, it continues on down the leg, and curves around the front of the foot. And when it's pointing that direction, it hits the line in the floor. Beautiful alignment. That's a gorgeous shape. Let's look at another alignment. We've got the line that comes along the top of the painting at the back and hits the arm, which cuts down across the front of the fan, which swings over to where the leg meets the other part of the frame and out. Let's go back up to the fan again, come down not quite to the hand, but to just where the dark meets, and that's a perfect alignment down the side of the leg down to the floor. If we go back to the outside edge of the fan itself, the outside edge of the fan curves around and points to another beautifully fascinating little flourish of detail within the picture. Okay, let's look at the same image, only up top this time. This would be what you'd call your traditional photograph of the dancer. Let's look at some alignments within this one. We've got the background, but look how the background lines up. Let's go back and look how the background lines up with the edge of the costume and the fan. And once it hits that point, it goes down across the ends of the fingers. Right dead center in the photo reference. Let's look at across the middle. We got it coming across through and it meets the elbow, right at the elbow, creating an arrowhead right at the elbow. Let's come down the line of the arm and it points straight to the end of the fingers, which is exactly in line with the background shadow coming down through. So on leaving you with this one, I want to say one thing. Composition is everything. And background is as important as subject. So when you're looking for their alignment to improve your composition, that's what I want you to do. Look for their alignment to improve your composition. I want to thank you for listening. Go to www.piercepaintings.com for more, and hopefully see you in a class.